For today's Essential Heretics 101 feature, Kelli and Nolan talk to Culture Amp CEO Didier Elzinga, revealing data-driven insights on building culture-first companies, balancing psychological safety with accountability, and prioritizing growth as engagement's foundation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of HR Heretics. Today we have a special guest, Didier Elzinga, who is the CEO of Culture Amp. Everybody knows what Culture Amp is who listens to this show. You guys are an employee experience platform. As I was doing my research, though, for the show, I learned that you actually worked in film and most specifically on Harry Potter movies. So, Didier, how do you go from working on Harry Potter movies to being the CEO of Culture Amp?
Nolan, Kelli, I'm delighted to be here. And that's obviously a question I get asked a lot. So, little quick background. I'm a software engineer by training. I fell into a small post-production company. I was employee number 4 or 5. And over 13 years, I was software engineer. I was actually sysadmin, software engineer, artist, CTO, and then CEO. And I ran that company. I got to this point where I'm like, I don't know if making the next version of Expendables is really the difference in the world that I want to make. I became good friends with Mike and Scott at Atlassian, watching them build their business. And I'm like, their business model looks way better than my business model. And I kept coming back to people and culture because I realized that was actually the thing that drove me the most, which is how do you bring a group of people together and try and do something really difficult and do it in a way that you can be proud of. And so I used to joke and still do joke that as a CEO, you're a glorified psychiatrist. I wanted to build software to help that. And Culture Amp was born. And so that's the mission for us, which is to create a better world of work. And here, almost 13 years later, I'm still here.
I want to talk about, you call it a culture-first company. You said, the real test of culture is when things don't go to plan. Why should you invest in your people? Because when things don't work, they will invest in you. Can you tell our audience, what do you think are the important ingredients in a culture-first company?
Culture first doesn't mean culture over everything else. There's a phrase my wife uses, which I really like, which is a culture-first company validates the human being while asking more of the human doing. And so organizations that you would probably say aren't culture first may be amazing because they demand really high things, they have really high standards, they push really hard, but they break people because they literally don't see the person as a fundamentally important component. They don't see the culture as a fundamentally important part. Equally, places that are like, we're just a really nice place to be, we're all good friends, they don't produce great work either. So there is the culture first piece is in the middle. And it's about understanding in the long run, performance is your culture. I learned something from, there's an NBA player, Shane Battier, and he has this thing which he calls a coherency matrix. And so you have on one axis, trust, psychological safety, broad sense of what we would consider to be a good culture. And on the other axis, you have mission orientation and, everybody being focused on achieving an outcome. And similar to what I was saying before, if you are fully focused on achieving an outcome, but there is no trust, it's a miserable place to be and people break. If you are fully focused on creating all the trust, but there's not enough mission orientation, you get a slipping standards where even good people aren't producing at the level they used to produce because not everybody's actually pushing in the same direction. But his insight that really resonated with me is that top right that we all want, where those two things are both in train, is not a stable state. It's that you will constantly fall off and you have to figure out how to pull yourself back up. And so for me, that's what a culture first company is. It's constantly riding that line down the middle and understanding what it means and being very intentional about it.
You founded Culture Amp over 15 years ago. I'd love to know through all the ups and downs, the changes, the chaos, the evolution, what has remained extremely true through it all? What's the data that was true 15 years ago and is just as true today from your perspective?
So one of the key things we look at is engagement. The strongest, longest correlation to engagement has always been, this is a place where I can grow in my career. This is a place where I can develop. And so the thing that I feel has never changed is both the need and the importance of growth. And I think one of the reasons I started Culture Amp was this realization that for better or for worse, work is increasingly how we create meaning in our lives. So I feel like we have an obligation to create workplaces that give people more positive and more powerful identities. And the key to that is growth. And the data underpins it. You create an environment where people are growing. Just if I can quickly share some data, on that whole question about leaders and managers, we actually went and looked at it in the data. And so we looked at people that perceive themselves to have a good manager and people that perceive themselves to have a good or a poor leader. So if you have a good manager, but a poor leader, what do you think is the percentage likelihood that you will stay?
60 something.
It's 38. Now, if you have a good leader, but a poor manager, what do you think it is?
60.
Yeah, 60. So it's the exact opposite. It is actually more important for you to trust the leaders in the company than it is to trust your direct leader, direct manager. Yeah. Do you want to know something even funnier? So if you have both, so good leader, good manager is 89%, and poor leader, poor manager is 22%. That data was from 2017 when we ran the first analysis. We just reran it to see what happened. So over the 7-year period, the poor leader, good manager has stayed basically the same at 37. The poor manager, good leader has gone up 16 points to 76. So it goes back to what we were talking about, just the difficulty of the world right now and how important leadership is.
I either see leaders who intrinsically understand that there is economic value and business value when they grow their teams, or they don't, and they just immediately start to rely on recruiting. Like, what are you learning on how to influence these people who don't intrinsically understand it?
Oh, wow. There's so many things in that I want to pick up on. My somewhat heretical answer is don't bother. Like, enough people get it that it's not worth wasting your time trying to convince the people that don't. Like, honestly, just go find some people to do and go work with them. But when we think about the data side of it and what we can bring to bear, what I'm actually really excited about is we're just starting to see enough data that we can draw some really interesting conclusions. Having next to no difference is an incredibly strong predictor of share price performance. We did our own bit of data showing the impact of implementing a structured performance review. What we did see was that on a range of factors, for men, it made no difference to their perception on my role is evaluated fairly, work is handed out properly, I have opportunities for growth and development, important factors on somebody's view. But for women, it eradicated the historical gap. So there was about a 10 percentage point gap between the men and women when you looked across all of our customers. And after they implemented a structured performance review process, that shrunk to about 2 percentage points. That's huge. I think what we can do is we can bring data to try and debunk myths. We did some work years ago, actually with Salesforce, and we were looking at their teams and looking at sales managers and people in their teams and engagement. And we did some analysis and we were able to show that the strongest correlation for performance of that team and quota achievement was whether or not the people in the team perceived their sales manager to believe that people were important. And that was incredibly powerful data because it allowed the people team to go to all of their sales leaders who didn't want to come to any of the training and didn't want to do any of those things and go, hey, I know you don't want to be here, but I just wanted to point out to you that the people that make more money than you, this is what they do. Now you have people's attention.
Hey, everyone. We'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. On this show, we tell the truth about HR. And one of my favorite conversations we've had was with Melanie Naranjo. She put it so simply. HR isn't about optimizing for compliance. It's optimizing for people, for culture, trust, and workplaces where folks actually want to stay. That's why I'm such a fan of what Melanie and her team at Ethena are building. She was brutally honest about it.
So Ethena, we're a compliance company, which let's just put it out there. That sounds pretty boring if you think about it, right? Okay, harassment prevention training, not very exciting, right? We are very lucky in that we are in the HR tech space that's required, right? Harassment prevention training is not really optional. You need it. The question is, who are you going to use for it?
Exactly. You're doing this training whether you want to or not. But here's what she told us about the impact.
The amount of impact that I've been able to have from the HR perspective has been just huge. It's phenomenal. We're doing all these amazing things that, quite frankly, too many companies don't do because they don't understand the power of their HR team.
Instead of boring, check-the-box training that everyone hates, Ethena delivers content that's modern and impactful. We're talking 200-plus courses in 100-plus languages with a 93% learner positivity rating to back it up. They take on all the tough topics: harassment prevention, workplace violence prevention, code of conduct, and make them actually engaging. And for HR, it's effortless. Training runs on autopilot with automated enrollments and reminders. There's even a built-in hotline and case management system to help a true speak-up culture. Look, you're going to do compliance training anyway. Why not use something that actually works and doesn't make your people want to hide under their desks? Done right, like with Ethena, compliance becomes a strategic tool. It's actually a way to reinforce your values and build a stronger workplace. Check them out at goethena.com/heretics. That's goethena, goethena.com/heretics. Get 10% off of your first year.
AI changes how work gets done. Recruiting is no exception. Metaview is the AI platform purpose-built for recruiting. If you're looking to level up your AI adoption and see real impact from intake to offer, it's a no-brainer. Metaview's suite of AI agents works for you at every stage of the hiring process. Their platform powers instant job post creation, AI-powered candidate Q&A, insights on pipeline performance, compensation, and so much more. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in candidate debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes all of that. For every candidate in every pipeline, bring radical efficiency and precision to your hiring process with perfect data from every conversation. Metaview covers all of your compliance needs, works with all of your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at more than 3,000 elite companies like Brex, Deel, 11 Labs, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Just head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes. I love what you said around the data is like the start of this. I just want to accent that because I've been a part of so many companies where, oh my God, they'll take the 1,000-person report and go away, alone behind the curtain, dissect it and do all these perfect hypotheses, and they don't talk to anyone. And it's like, listen, the data can take you so far. Let's not do this unless we're actually going to get underneath it and have these honest conversations, which is the, in my experience, the most important and hardest part of this process, and the one that's usually least followed.
Yeah. And you talked about Esther before, and we've been fortunate. I asked her, we're talking about empathy and accountability. And I said, what do you think is the biggest challenge today for leaders? And she said, I think we have a generation of leaders that don't know how to embody accountability. She went on and she talked about it's to do with parenting, it's to do with all sorts of bits and pieces. She said, like, if you have a child, you have your 5-year-old and they want a chocolate donut and you don't think they should have one because it's not healthy or whatever, it's your job to say no and it's their job to be upset about it. And I'm like, actually really love that. And she said, but in organizations, we're not very good at that. We're not good at being able to do that part. At the same time, you still have to be able to create that space. And I think what's so powerful about like an engagement survey or something is it's a way of creating space to have a conversation that you're obviously not having. And then the data helps you realize we're not having this conversation that we really need to be having. Now you have to go to humans and you have to actually learn to listen.
That's actually one of my core learnings of like, I remember using Culture Amp. I'm a first-time CPO. I'm like, let's go get Culture Amp. Like, let's go deploy this. And then we hear a bunch of shit from employees that I was completely unprepared for. Then what I did, I think this is where I made the critical mistake, is I tried to build the people roadmap to address all of the concerns of the employees versus taking a step back and saying like, okay, this is what we're hearing from our employees. What do we stand for? Like, what does this company stand for and where do we want to be going? And I think that experience made me a detractor of engagement surveys. But I think it was actually like my execution after the survey was in and letting employees basically run the people team roadmap.
100%. I'm so glad you said it that way, because in a perfect world, you have a strategy. Like, that's why you're the CPO. you pull together all these things, and it's a signal that you go, these bits of my strategy are working and make sense. This doesn't tally. Either I'm not executing, or maybe my strategy is not the right part of the strategy here, or whatever. But like, it's an input, but it shouldn't set your strategy. It should feed into it. And Anna Binder, who's on my board, she's the CPO at Asana, and she has a great quote, which I love. It is, feedback is not a gift, it is a workout. It's this idea that like feedback is like a menu in a restaurant. So you kind of look through the menu and you go, today I'm going to eat the fish and I'm going to have the vanilla slice. But yeah, if you try and eat the whole menu, oh my God.
Yeah. Didier, I mean, you've been doing this for so many of us, over the years. Like, how do you run Culture Amp? What are your, what have been your non-negotiables over the past 15 years? How do you protect that through scale? Like, what's your deal? What do you stand for and kind of, fall on the sword for?
Yeah, I love it's such a continuing education in all of that, because we're 1,000 people now, just under. I mean, the values are at the heart of everything. So our first value is have the courage to be vulnerable, and that's been a really big learning point. So both in the positive affirmation of that, in terms of what does it mean to actually create space where you can be that and create an environment where people do that, but also realizing that, to quote Brene Brown, vulnerability without boundaries is manipulation. And so, it's not just unfettered vulnerability. It's not somebody coming in and dumping on their manager issues they have at home that manager is not equipped to deal with. That's not vulnerability. But vulnerability is about creating a space where you get to be more of yourself. You get to fail. You get to not try and pretend that you're always right. And that leans into growth. So for me, having the courage to be vulnerable is the first part of growth. We have learn faster through feedback. Trust people to own decisions and amplify others. Trust people to own decisions is the hardest value for us, because everybody reads it as an autonomy value, whereas it's actually an accountability value. And so there's a whole dialogue on that. The things that have always been true for me, it goes back to this growth thing. Like, one of the lines that I use a lot is, if we're thinking about someone internal versus an external candidate, the way I like to think about it is, where do we think that internal candidate will be 6 months from now? That's the person we should be evaluating with the person we're trying to hire. Because it's going to take time for us to hire that person. It's going to take time for that person to come on board. And in a way, we want to bet on that momentum and that potential. We want to look at this person and go, in 6 months, this person could do the job. And so I think if in 6 months the person could do the job, you should go with the person internal. Like, I want Culture Amp to be a place where you do, on the whole, not everybody, but on the whole, you do at least 2 steps. Because otherwise we're kind of wasting that potential. But something I had to kind of come to was, when I thought about growth early on, I had a conversation. We were a couple of hundred people, and we were talking about commitment to growth. And then somebody said, yeah, but not everybody wants to be growing in their role. Sometimes people are just quite happy where they're at, and for their own life, there's other things that are more important to them than work and stuff. And so we shouldn't always be striving for that. And I thought, that's very true. And I agree with that. But then, as the years went by, I went, actually, we can't be that company for both of those people. If we want to be a company where people are really going to grow and have an opportunity to grow, then we have to be committed to that all through. And we just have to say to people, it's not like you're not going to get to stay here if you plateau. Like, everybody plateaus. But you shouldn't come to Culture Amp if you just want a job that's second place to other things in your life. Like, I always say to people, we borrow our time at work from people or things much more important than the work is. Even if you're a workaholic, and I am, and it's fundamentally important to have that. And I never want any work to ever come before someone's family or health. But I've had to learn that for us to be the company we want to be, to build the product we want to be what we want to be for people that are coming here, we also have to be willing to say we can't be everything for everyone. This is going to be a hard place. It's going to be tiring. It's going to be challenging, but you will grow. And that's the commitment that we're going to make. So that's the thing that I've kind of doubled down on as we've grown. And then the last thing is, I knew it coming out of Hollywood. I've had it hammered into me in Culture Amp, and it's the thing I believe to my core, is that storytelling is the most important skill as a leader. And so how do we teach leaders and managers how to tell stories? Because I think that's the biggest skill that they need to be able to be effective.
So funny. I mean, one of my good friends, Rima Singh, is the head of people over at Pixar, which ironically is another, filmmaking. And I had coffee with her recently, and she's like, it just gets hammered into us from day one. It's storytelling. So maybe it's the film. I don't know what it is, but that just connected for me.
My old boss, Henry Ward, CEO of Carta, one of the best things he ever gave me was the presentation skills of Steve Jobs. Which like took me down this rabbit hole of like, holy shit, like there's an art to this thing. So I totally agree. And I've now become like so obsessed with learning how great storytellers do it and breaking it down to like its essence, because it has such a powerful impact on humans. How are you doing that with your employees and with your managers?
I mean, obviously you give training and support, and you create that forum, but there's two parts to it. The first part is the skill, and you can learn that, like in learning how to tell stories, and there's lots of resources out there. The other part, and this is where the first value is so important, is the thing you learn in Hollywood is there are only a few kind of key stories. So the hero with 1,000 faces, all of the kind of comparative mythology stuff. And one of the most powerful stories is the origin story. Where did I come from? And so often when I'm working with somebody, it'll be like, what's your story? Like, you may not have this, the refined presentation skills, but you can tell an authentic story that nobody else can tell. And so if I go back to the early days of Culture Amp, Ed Swee was one of our first salespeople in the US. And we'd got to know him at Chase. He was working at Chase, and he'd actually been helping us as we set up all our accounts. And then he'd gone to SuccessFactors, and he applied for a job at Culture Amp, and we ended up hiring him as one of our early sales guys. And so my story, when I'm telling the Culture Amp stories, I used to work in Hollywood, and I was a CEO, and blah, blah, blah. And so he would tell a version of my story. And I said to him, that's my story. You should come up with your own. And so the story that we came up with, which he would use, is he would go sit across the table from a CPO, and he would say, I've been at Culture Amp now for 6 months, but before Culture Amp, I was the person you used to send those surveys to. I worked at Chase. I worked at SuccessFactors. I worked in these companies, and I would get these things. And this is what I wanted you to hear. And this is how I wanted you to listen to me. And which is why I'm now here. And so it's that, you just help people understand, why are they here? And how can they connect in an authentic way to the people around them?
And I bet he closed a lot of deals.
He was very good. He was a very good sales guy.
Didier, we've been doing this now for almost 16, 18 months. And this is one of my favorite conversations so far. Thank you so much for the time. This was a blast.
Oh, thank you for having me. You had me at the podcast title, HR Heretic. I love it. It's I think that's the thing we have to do more than anything, is just keep fighting the good fight and saying to people, the way you've been told it should work may not be the way, and the way that you feel in your heart might be, and we can help you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Didier. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.